I'll go to take this head on. Soon I'll come around. Lost and never found. Waiting for my words. Seen but never heard. Buried underground. But I'll keep coming.
2019 has been pretty stellar for gaming, like Devil May Cry, Kingdom Hearts 3, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and Sekiro. Though that one's personally for me though. Including other games that has been long been promised, such as Bloodstained and Death Stranding. Though regarding Death Stranding, it's been pretty divided on what the general consensus is for the polarizing gameplay. Despite being made by the same director that made Metal Gear, Hideo Kojima, it's not the same thing. Or rather, not to be expected to be the same thing. While the game does incorporate stealth, it's more of an afterthought. The gameplay boils down to you delivering packages from point A to B, but mixed in with sci-fi and post-apocalyptic horror, as you traverse the lands of desolated America. Conceptually, I understand who it was going for. However, the execution was poorly implemented. You're supposed to feel isolated, and traveling the lands alone, and how perilous it is to journey from one point to another. The overworld of the game has only two hostiles, the mules and the BTs. The mules are essentially your post-apocalyptic archetype when it comes to having bandits or mutated carnivores, as seen from the likes of Mad Max.
But we can do the Road Warrior!
No, we go in, we kill. No more talk, we kill. Soon, my dog of war, but we have to do it my way.
While BTs are basically the supernatural enemies that are unkillable, well, seemingly so in the beginning, needing to only sneak around and hold your breath so they don't catch you. Playing a little game of hot and cold with the BTs, one could argue that the world itself is against you, dealing with the environment and having the weather go against you as well. Most of your hours will be spent on walking. There's no room for a lot of improvisation as you travel since you're given little equipment to work with. By the third chapter, that's when the game truly opens up. However, it took about 4 hours to get into it, which is a sin on its own given the design philosophy for most open world games. Despite how open the world is, it's actually on rails. An illusion of freedom, if you will. Character progression is pretty linear and not much to work with. Open world games tend to be more malleable with exploring, having scaling being a factor only, but it comes with high risk and high reward. So if you happen to choose to start off with endgame equipment that early in the game, Death Stranding's case is a bit locked in how you get stuff. Since you have to do story first that is predicated on doing deliveries for that area, because you have to follow a set of rules from going one destination to another and how you get equipment. Like traversing the land and getting equipment a bit later rather than sooner. The equipment I use the most is the exoskeleton power, given to the fact that you can actually carry multiple cargoes at once, beneficial if you're going to do multiple missions. There's a lot of micromanaging you have to deal with. You also have to worry about your equipment durability, that's with along with your cargo, and how you distribute the weight, hence why earlier I mentioned why the power unit is essential. If you're smart about going about your routes, you can actually make through the delivery with 4 to 5 trips without worrying about equipment degradation. There's also a factor of your shoes to break, making walking a lot more worse in a game that's about walking, as well as your batteries that powers up your exoskeleton, bikes, vehicles, and other electronical devices, as well as dealing with the bridge baby stress. Given the fact that the bridge baby is basically your spider sense, sensing the BTs when a timefall occurs, rendering using the Urdra deck, the little robot arm you have that detects BTs, completely useless since it's all about visual cues and pressing R1 when it prompts. Also a gripe of mine when the timefall occurs. The game will trigger 3 pauses, 1 when you're entering timefall, 2 when you're near a BT infested area, and 3 when there's actual BTs around. Since ultimately it stops you at a screeching halt, killing your momentum when you're carrying your packages. Timefall is an in-game mechanic where it rains and it eats away at your cargo's durability, essentially ruining it, failing your delivery, destroying the contents inside the boxes. Though to be perfectly frank, I never actually worried about it since the game gives you ample enough time to actually escape the BT-infested area. Matter of fact, I never actually used container sprays to repair my damages. The game is rather lenient on giving you S rank. All you have to do is not make the damage exceed over 50%. The overall game is not even that difficult to begin with. To note, I actually played the whole game entirely on hard. The game is just rather annoying because there's a lot of micromanaging you have to deal with. Stamina, stress, cargo durability, and batteries. As I mentioned earlier, the game truly opens up by Chapter 3, lending you PCCs to create structures or facilities to be at your disposal as you travel, which you can create bridges, safe houses, zip lines, postbox, watchtowers, timefall shelters, and generators. Though to be completely honest, I think the watchtowers are completely useless. You can actually scan better with just the Ordra deck, just tapping R1 twice. The added bonus is that you can actually see the terrain better, whether it's hazard or water's too deep. The best I would suggest is just building generators and zip lines. You're just going to waste resources anyway. The best way I farmed materials was raiding mule camps, having a postbox filled with nothing but resources, which is honestly the best way to expedite materials. Also, it's worth noting about the PCCs, you can't build them everywhere. Considering that you need networking to help you build these facilities in the first place, it ranges from 500 to even 2,000, but only if you have enough signal strength, which can only be obtained if you go through the story, visiting facilities after facilities, establishing a network that can actually help you build safe houses to help you recover your stamina, stress, and fast travel. While fast travel is a thing in the game, it doesn't really help you all that much, considering that you can't bring your cargo with you. I mentioned earlier about the zip lines making it easier for you to travel, but again, that's after you establish a network and have enough signal boost to even create one of those. Which now comes to the biggest pain in the ass in the game, which is the backtracking. Remember how I said earlier that you need a network to establish, right? Well, you can only do that as you progress through the story and making more connections with the facilities. There's one part of the game where it's completely bullshit, where you have to scale an entire mountain on one side, and a mission later after that you have to scale it from the other side, with completely no resources available to you. Plus you gotta deal with the weather and your stamina meter, as well as your equipment durability, traversing those mountains, which again is also the game's narrative that the world is against you. Narratively, it also handicaps you at some points. But thankfully for the online system here in the game, you can also find other people's facilities that you can actually use for yourself. But also at times it also teases you the idea that you can use zip lines, despite the fact that you can't actually build them yourselves because you don't have the network established for that area. But after dealing with the tedium of traveling back and forth, it becomes more of a moot point than anything else. What's also punishing is the combat, where defending yourself feels like a punishment more than an actual fun thing to do, because you're more concerned about your cargo rather than what's on the field, or anything attacking you at that moment. Other games allows you to avoid combat in more creative ways. In Death Stranding's case, you had to avoid the conflict altogether, in the most jarring way possible, as like scaling another side of the hill or mountain, wasting your time and your durability altogether, which is upsetting since the game has a great story but terrible gameplay. It also reprimands you for killing people, causing void outs. Void outs can be caused after killing a mule in the game, causing a nuclear explosion like to happen, disfiguring the land around you. BTs can also cause void outs if you fight their mini-bosses, but only by when you get caught by them, in a one-hit kill kind of maneuver. As I said earlier in the video that you can't kill BTs yet, because you need special type of equipment and rounds to just even kill them, which requires your blood or bodily waste to help you do this, which again, more micromanaging. It feels more of a chore as I play the game, especially with all the micromanaging I just mentioned. At least to its merit, it runs at a stable frame rate. Only time it dips is when there's too much going on, and too many things to render at the same time. Other than the gameplay itself, I actually love how Death Stranding looks, as well as soundtrack, which I wish we had an MP3 player like in the old Metal Gear games that you can take with you when you want to relax and listen to tunes as you see the open world and scenery. The game without doubt is unremarkably beautiful, but it's just a pain in the ass to play though. And full disclosure, I am completely okay with terrible gameplay so long as the story is good. And thankfully, Death Stranding delivers on that, pun intended. The only cardinal sin so far is just that the gameplay is just boring, and that's terrible to say that about a game when you're supposed to have fun. What's also sad is that the combat is even lackluster, to borderline half-assed. There's not a lot of penalties when you die too in the game. You can also revive right off the bat, but dying to a mule you lose all your cargo. The only time you actually trigger a true game over is when you fight humanoid bosses. and if your cargo is completely destroyed. It's upsetting how undercooked the mechanics for the gameplay is. Normally games would encourage improvisation. Here it's just static and stocked, which sadly only occurs with boss fights, but even then that's half-baked. Also, I have no way to end this. Norman Reedus has a fetus. Say that 3 times fast. If not, then you're gay.